And let me know if you got it, if you got notifications. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. We are joined again by Dr. MRIA Cernat, who's a journalism professor, instructor at, actually, doctor, remind us of the university that you work at and all of your various titles.
I work currently at 2 universities in Bucharest, Romania. The first one is Titu Maiorescu. Actually, he was a very conservative Romanian intellectual. So this is Titu Maiorescu. I work in the communication department, then communication science and international relations. And the other university, a public university where I work, is the National School of Political Science and Administration, also in the public relation and communication department.
And when she's not doing
and
that,
I'm also working as a journalist in a
exactly.
journalistic.
Exactly. I was just about to say when she's not working at those 2 universities as a journalism instructor and engaging in people with philosophy and so forth. Yes, she is a journalist for the Barricade, which is very much a left wing, a new independent and news outlet that mainly focuses on Eastern European topics. And there's an English translation, there's a Bulgarian translation, Polish, Romanian. And what other languages actually as well?
Well, these are the main ones. I think we had some contributions and some relations with Greece and some articles translated in Hungarian, but this is pretty much it.
Alrighty, and then before we start, yes, I know that everyone is completely focused on the 2020 circus race, which is completely crashing and burning before our own eyes. It looks as if Donald Trump is going to be re-elected. And hard to say if it's a landslide, but it does look as if so far he has won. But the votes are still being counted in because they still have to do all of the mail-ins. But we are not going to talk about that, although we might even return to it because the topic at hand that the good doctor and I are going to talk about is how can the left, using Eastern Europe as a perfect example, how can the left champion socio-economic left-wing policies while in very hostile territory, while the people there are viciously anti-left because of all of the horrors of communism, but also in Eastern Europe there's a very socially conservative culture, much like much of the red states in the U.S., which voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. And how can the left advance these populist left-wing causes while trying not to alienate socially conservative people with our socially liberal causes? And so it's going to be an interesting topic because and I think it is relatable to an extent in the U.S. and the UK. The UK with the whole Brexit referendum, which when the left tried to persuade everyone that they needed a second referendum, they were massacred. And in the U.S., there's a growing movement where people want to stop talking about identity politics and not that they want to abandon talking about the rights of Black people, queer people, feminism, and so forth, but that it's much more easier to convert even Trump supporters to their cause when they talk about populist left-wing economic messages and sort of, well, anywho, so we're going to be talking about all of that, Doctor, I think that's a pretty good place to start, because can you talk to us about what you just told me off the air in a recent local election in Romania, and the horrible thing which is going on in Poland, in which abortion is outlawed, and go right ahead.
Well, I discussed this idea that Romania, unfortunately, is a very, very conservative country. We are a poor country and a conservative country. And for a progressive leftist, this is very challenging, extremely challenging, because while you see that the people are economically oppressed, while you see there is so much sexism, misogyny, anti-LGBT messages, you have to appeal to the masses in order to get your message heard. Mm-hmm. This is the big dilemma. How do you do that? How do you appeal to people that are poor, but at the same time conservative? And I told you about an event that for the international audience, I think it is very important to hear it and to analyze it. Because it is complicated. I discussed it also with Boyan Stanislavski on our podcast, but it is so extraordinary that I think it's worth mentioning again. What happened in September in Romania, because we had local elections. And I think it was a little bit prior to that, to the local elections, when the electoral campaign was unfolding and all the parties were trying to advance their agenda as normal. In a village in Romania, I don't know if it's a village right now, but it's a small town near Bucharest, Voluntari, a very conservative place where we had a social democrat mayor. And you may think that the social democrats mean something progressive, but in Romania, this is not the case. And I'll explain why. So what happened there?
So they're called so they're called, sorry about that. So they're called the Social Democrats, but it's actually a right-wing party, both on the economic fronts and
they were economically more relaxed, and they gave people some money, and they were trying to impose a tax for the rich, and they were trying to have to give a meaning to the word social in their title, but in terms of cultural values, they are the most conservative, among the most conservative parties in Romania. So a couple of activists who are actually social democrats went to this place, Voluntari, dressed at the same time as Union Save Romania politicians. That was another party, and the Social Democrats were competing against Union Save Romania. So they were dressed like Union Save Romania politicians, and at the same time as LGBT activists, and saying that they are gay people, okay? They had their jeans ripped off, and they said Union Save Romania. They wrote on their behinds Union Save Romania, wanting to convey the message that if the villagers and the people there would have voted for Union Save Romania, they would have voted for gay people. Oh, what a horror. And this is such cheap political theater. It is a moment when reality beats fantasy. Can you imagine something like that going on? I don't know. I told you, even in the most conservative parts of the US, maybe North Dakota or something. And I think there will be consequences for things like that. I mean, to mock also the Union Save Romania and also the LGBT, and to try to connect the two in order to scare the villagers and to say that, look, the gay people are going to come and they're going to take your children. And if you vote for this guy, that would mean that you vote for those morally bankrupt people. And you can imagine the slurs they are saying and uttering to smear the LGBT community. I mean, and this works, you know, this is the type of political messages that are being conveyed in Romania in 2020, and we have to be realistic. this is the situation, okay? This is what happened. And there was not, I think that with something like that would have happened in the US, I mean, everybody would have been appalled and would have screamed about it. But here,
because ironically, I mean, even though we do have one of the most, far right, politicians who's president right now, who knows if he'll be unseated, Mr. Joe Biden. And, once upon a time, even, oops, sorry, I meant Donald Trump. Donald Trump, one of the most right-wing, presidents that, that we've ever had. But, even Donald Trump has to, even though he appeals very much to the Christian conservatives and says he's going to, stop abortion and so forth, he still has to walk a bit of a fine line by saying, hey, black people, what have you got to lose when you vote for Donald Trump, and paid a little bit of lip service like, hey, I think the queer community is going to vote for us because we have like the right jobs programs for them. So I think it seems like in Canada and in the US, you can't really get away anymore with bashing queer people, not even really bashing feminists, but what seems to be much more tolerable these days, and like the new culture wars, is bashing immigrants, particularly illegal immigrants, and some of the dog whistling that goes on with Muslim communities and Islamophobia. But yeah, I think you're right. That aside, even though there are robust right-wing movements, otherwise we wouldn't have gotten Donald Trump and we wouldn't have gotten Boris Johnson or the rise of Nigel Farage and UKIP. At the same time, they don't so much anymore, focus so much on, saying we're going to take away a woman's right to choose. They may have a little bit of like transphobia, but in the end of the day, I think it's all about like economics, and they more or less get away with, bashing immigrants and illegal immigrants. And that's a whole nother topic altogether. But that seems to be where like where the right in Western Europe and North America tries to, advance these days. And it's because even though Bernie Sanders is, even though, he said that he was a socialist, and I was of the opinion that Bernie's only going to be in the primaries for 3 months time, and then and he'll be out of he'll be out of a job, and it's going to be all about Clinton. His message really resonated with a lot of people, and this in the country of of McCarthyism, Reaganomics, Bernie was able to completely demystify socialism, and maybe his definition is much more simplistic than our definition, but he said like, hey, socialism is all about is all about healthcare as a right, education as a right. We help out the poor. We give you we raise your minimum wage, and we fight against the oligarchy, which is ruining democracy and stuff like that. And that resonated very well in many states, which you would think a Democrat would have no possibility of winning. Like Bernie won in West Virginia. He won the primaries in several of the same places. Donald Trump won the sort of deindustrialized places that all lost their jobs because they all went over to China and to Mexico and so forth like that. And, Bernie kept that economic left-wing populist message, and he managed to convert people who otherwise would have just been flaming right-wingers into thinking, you know what, this guy makes sense. And I even met right-wingers and people who even believe in capitalism, so you can call them liberal Democrats and whatnot. And they would say to me, I really like Bernie Sanders. I hope he wins the primaries. And I met Trump supporters who said to me, if Hillary Clinton, I want Bernie Sanders to win the primaries. If it's him versus Trump, I'll vote for Bernie. If it's Clinton versus Trump, I'll vote for Trump. And they were talking to me that they would vote for Trump because Trump wanted to, punish corporations that went overseas and stuff like that. They might have been very socially conservative. Who knows? I'm sure if you asked them, do you think that black people should get reparations for slavery, they would probably say no. But I think if it was a Bernie versus Trump, it would have been much more interesting. And even right-wing commentators like Steve Bannon and Ann Coulter all said that if Donald was fighting against Bernie, he would have had a much harder time winning. But when it was him versus Clinton, we knew that we had it in the bag.
Yeah, well, I told you, it is very challenging. And the fact that Bernie Sanders managed to convey this left-wing message to the American people is great. But in Romania, I think it is very difficult to convey this type of message because right now the left is very much preoccupied with questions that are far away from from the problems of economic oppression. And I think our only chance is to stand by those issues and to focus on those issues. But then again, I told you, I don't have an answer to this problem.
That's difficult. It's difficult.
Again,
it's a huge dilemma.
You would say something like, let us not debate the problems of feminism, okay? Let us not debate the problems of people of color because we have a Roma minority here and we have 500 years of slavery and we had the Roma Holocaust here in Romania. Let us not debate that. We have to debate only the problems regarding the economy and inequality, and this is not very appealing either. So you have this situation where you either lie to yourself and you are willing to compromise on things that you consider sincerely very important in order to convey your message for a conservative audience. But then again, you would have to lie to yourself, and you would also have to stab in the back the people that are oppressed and severely oppressed, like the Roma people, like the Roma women who are oppressed from for different reasons while being Roma women of color. Then you have to stab in the back the LGBT community. And I don't know if that's okay. Maybe politically, I don't know what you think. I don't.
Yeah, well, because
if you want to convey your message, then you would have to compromise on many things and pretend that the feminist issues are not important, LGBT issues are not important, and that would be very controversial from my point of view, because I told you, you will be stabbing in the back people who are really oppressed and suffering. Or you can go ahead with your agenda, but then it would be very difficult to convey your message, because I told you, if I would try to go into a factory and speak to the workers, somebody who would want to hurt me politically or to smear me would just have to find some articles where I'm for abortion or where I stand against discrimination of the LGBT community, and they will say, look, this wicked witch is going to come, she's for the LGBT or for gay people, and she's promoting them. And it would be very difficult for me to talk about the minimum wage if they are conveying this message and they are presenting this image of a bad big witch that is going to support the LGBT coming and taking the children and all these fantasies that the right wing is relying on. So,
well, and it's interesting you mentioned that, and this is where I can bring this is where I can bring, both America and Britain as an example. I mean, in America, for example, the rights of queer people, of minorities in general, whether it's women, whether it's black people, I mean, I know it. I mean, I know it seems as if no progress has been made, but progress has been made. I mean, that's why we have a black middle class. That's why that's why you have people who are much more tolerant towards the queer community, way more compared to last time. I mean, the fact that like Obama even got away with protecting trans rights and the rights for trans people to go to whatever bathroom of their choice and serve in the military means that we have means that we are advancing. Maybe not as much as I would like, but we are advancing. However, that aside, if you're, you're probably very familiar with this stupid issue about guns and the whole Second Amendment in the U.S. Okay, I would love if we, if we could repeal, the stupid Second Amendment and have very strict gun laws and stuff like that. However, I know for a fact that it is electoral suicide if you were to even flirt with that idea. Bernie Sanders, Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party, they can talk all they want about, climate change, a Green New Deal, and Bernie can talk about like we need a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics, and even a right-wing electorate will say, you know what, the guy actually does make a lot of sense for that, and so they'll consider voting for him, and some of them even did vote for them, or at least will say privately, hey, this Bernie guy makes a lot of sense. And that Jill Stein, she's an interesting, character. However, if Bernie was to say something like, we need a constitutional amendment to repeal the Second Amendment, I know for a fact his political career would be over in less than 3 seconds. Because for whatever reason, and people may say that Americans are stupid for believing in a law like this, but that's just the political culture of people. That's just the culture of America, that they have this love for guns and the Second Amendment, and therefore, I thought it was very strange when Hillary Clinton attacked Bernie for not wanting to prosecute gun manufacturers when a school shooting happens, and okay, she may have won a couple of primaries in New York where people are more socially liberal, but when it came to her versus Trump, she lost. So it's a huge dilemma, and I remember the last time I talked with you. I told you that that Jeremy Corbyn, the fact that he allowed himself to be bullied into supporting a second referendum on the whole Brexit vote, and you had many of those Labour politicians who wanted to remain, and Liberal Democrats and the Greens and Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Left Nationalist Party. They were all saying, the voters were the voters did not know what they were voting for. They got manipulated by Facebook. They got manipulated by yada, yada, yada. Well, you know what? They all went in with a second referendum. They all tried to do this tactical voting thing, and they were all wiped out. Because, like it or not, the British electorate voted to leave the European Union, and like it or not, it was a democratic referendum, and yes, it was too close for comfort, but, Leave did win, and all of them going back into, European Union this, European Union that. No, the electorate rejected that, especially in the North, the Midlands, and Wales, which used to be traditional Labour voters, the very places Jeremy Corbyn had to win. But because they were so focused in their bubbles in London, so I definitely understand the terrible dilemma that the Eastern European left faces, because you don't want to throw Roma people, women, the queer community, and even immigrant communities. You don't want to throw them under the bus, but at the same time, my friend Romania, she was saying, one of my best friends, she was saying to me that she's for all of those rights. She's socially liberal and she's also economically left, but she says that there is way too much focus amongst particularly the youth in Eastern European countries like Romania on the European Union and feminism, queer rights. And she says that just does not resonate with the majority working class, socially conservative people who ends up voting against their own interests by voting for all of these rival oligarchic parties.
Exactly, and the problem is that even the most progressive financial institutions, like we have here, for instance, the Norwegian funds, it is so interesting that they are now not allowing two categories of organizations to apply when they open a call, and they give money for research and for NGOs to be socially active. So for activism. They do not accept religious organizations, but they do not accept unions. And that should tell you something. That should tell you something about the way the left is somehow geared, it's somehow made to go into the direction that is not threatening economically. I think this is very important to notice here, that if you look but you don't have enough power because you need a lot of researchers to see what are the main topics and fields where the left is allowed to get money to be socially active. I have this personal experience that I was so intrigued by the fact that they do not accept unions as organizations that could apply for getting funding. This is very interesting, also because activism in Romania and also in Europe, but I'm pretty sure it is the same story in the United States, becomes some sort of business. And when you depend on financiers to give you the money, then you go with the rebellion, the so-called rebellion on funds, because this is paid rebellion.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly into the places where they sent you. And while I want to make sure that I'm correctly understood here, while I fully support minority rights and progressive politics, I think there is an interest for the elites not to have people that challenge economic inequalities.
Exactly.
Because while the LGBT community is recognized as an oppressed class, the working poor are not.
Exactly.
And this is not an identity that is oppressed. When you think about intersectionalism, and also this is also a problem. When you think about intersectionalism, you most likely would think about women, LGBT people, gay people, lesbian, and women of color. And you would not think of poor people. Poverty is a problem that should be discussed, and redistribution and taxation and things. I mean, human rights.
Exactly. You're allowed. The elites have said that we are allowed to talk about racism. We are allowed to talk about sexism to a certain extent. We are allowed to talk about anti, queer policies and pushing back against it. But the one ism we're not allowed to talk about is classism, which I think is the perfect definition for what capitalism, a plutocracy, and oligarchy is that it's an institutional classism against yours truly, the working class, the unemployed, and to an extent, the lower middle, the lower middle class, because the middle class is also a very funny, is in a very funny position where they're affluent enough that they can sort of get access to economic riches, but at the same time, if they're not, well connected, and if their parents don't have enough money to put them into an overpriced university, then they're at a very disadvantage. So they can very easily become, poor the moment they want their financial independence and start job hunting and going into debt to go to some of these overpriced universities in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America, Britain, and so forth.
Well, it is very important to capture also energies. And people are feeling disenfranchised, they are feeling lost. And who is going to give a voice to all this discontent? I mean, it will be usually intellectuals, the youth, and it is very important to guide them towards themes that are not very controversial, that are not very difficult to handle. And I want to talk about here a very interesting case from American politics that I saw. It was a debate around Section 213 in your legislation, saying that the social media is some sort of neutral medium. They are not implied, they are not a media, they are neutral. And it was the hearing in Congress where Ted Cruz basically grilled this guy from Twitter.
I think I even I think I even saw that. A friend of mine who invited me on his YouTube show, Jimbo. He has this show called Manitalks. I was watching a live stream of his, and he showed this clip of Ted Cruz. Who, by the way, is a completely batshit politician, very much a Christian conservative, very much like...
Yes, I know that, but let me explain. I think here...
He's did a good job grilling the Twitter guy, though.
Jack Dorsey is the name of that. So I see here two elites. One that wants to seem progressive, but is neoliberal, Mr. Dorsey, and the other one who's far right and conservative, and they are fighting, And this is another danger that we face. And you tackled the issue a little bit when you talked about the thing that in Eastern Europe, we have a lot of young people discussing identity politics problems. The problem is that right now, some of these causes are monopolized by a group like this fellow that wants to seem very progressive while having a rainbow t-shirt, but at the same time firing people. And at the same time, with one hand, he gives some rights to the minorities, and with the other, he smashes on unions, workers. And this is also another danger that we face. We face the danger of allying ourselves involuntarily with some neoliberal elites that want to seem, to pinkwash themselves, as you branded the term in the US, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
To use these causes, because in the end, these are minorities, okay? 4% of the people or less than 10%. So it doesn't cost economically so much to give them some rights, isn't it? So you may seem progressive in terms of, cultural and social rights for the minorities, but at the same time, you can be very harsh on unions and on workers. And I think it was one of your former Labor Secretaries, Reich, I think is his name.
Yes, Robert Reich, who I have. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and he showed how these corporations like Amazon and all the big ones, the Starbucks, they were all so touched by Black Lives Matter, and they were all saying how impressed they were about all the horrors that these people suffered, and at the same time, they were basically bullying all their laborers and doing awful stuff to them, and they were letting off people. And if you look closely to their board of directors or top management, you could probably find one or two people of color there, but then they were bragging about the diversity and inclusion, and they are talking even in their mission statements. I find this hypocrisy to be
well, and actually,
disgusting.
in fact, it's in fact, Doctor, it's even worse than that, because one of the past guests on 1+1 was Manar Muhawish Adli, or just Manar Adli, the editor-in-chief of Mint Press News, which is a very good independent anti-imperialist website. But they do sometimes do very very good domestic issues, and they did a very good one of their staff writers did a very good article, followed by a video presentation which Manar did, showing how all of these big banks like JP Morgan and so forth like that, and Amazon, they're all saying Black Lives Matter, and showing solidarity with all the protesters, but behind the scenes they've actually been donating a lot to the police, and they also work hand in glove with the American deep state to make sure that that there's censorship, and that they start a war overseas, and they all make a profit. And it's just so you have this interesting thing where yeah, and it's and there is a lot of hypocrisy. And the person that you were when you were talking about these wealthy,
Robert Reich is his name, and he did a short video showing
when you were talking about wealthy donors donating to NGOs, but with that comes strings attached. So okay, talk about fighting for immigrant rights and fighting against anti-queer politics, but at the same time you have those wealthy donors who are devastating the entire economy for working people and propping up oligarchy. They may not support a Donald Trump, and they may not support whatever fascist like the Law and Justice Party of Poland, but they're supporting other right-wing oligarchic friendly parties. And the person that reminds me of is George Soros, who I'm pretty sure you're quite familiar with in Romania. Anyone in Eastern Europe is familiar with him and his open societies. Yes, Mr. Soros, I'm sure, is very socially liberal, and he may go on left-wing channels, which he donates to, and talk about how how we need to regulate the economy, and that the economy is not working for everybody and so forth like that. But Mr. Soros, okay, when he had the choice to either donate to Hillary Clinton, who was such a Wall Street friendly politician, or Bernie Sanders, he supported Clinton and supported Obama beforehand, which says everything you need to know about these wealthy donors and their corrupt, insincere NGOs. And yes, they like the identity politics because it's easy. It doesn't take it. It does. Identity politics. When you say you're for, when you say you're for Black Lives Matter, when you say that you want that you welcome refugees with open arms, that doesn't take much courage. That's very much a common, a common sense thing. And I think anyone who doesn't support, the rights of, minorities, is a jerk. But it takes much more courage to say that this economic system is not working for anyone. And there's a danger in that whole, workers of the world unites, because that is saying to poor Black people, poor white people, poor women, and that funny and that muddled class of lower middle class people to all unite, start unions, and fight against the oligarchy, so that we all have a decent wage, and so that we all have access to education. And yeah, and of course, that's why, Hillary Clinton would say, things like, just because, we give everybody a minimum wage doesn't mean that, just because we regulate Wall Street, that doesn't mean that racism, and she said something, very bizarre like that. And even people I know who want reparations for, Black people because of slavery and stuff like that, they were all like just looking at Hillary Clinton and like thinking, what the, is this woman on about?
Yeah, well, and frankly, I would think that the only way out is to have some sort of mutual fund that we start collecting money and we finance our own research and we do our thing, because it is so detrimental to the left, this type of having people focus on very small issues. Like, you are anti-racist, you are anti-sexist, you are anti I don't know what, and you are all working there in your little bubble, okay, and you start competing for money. And then you should see the discussions, okay? Oh, you are competing for money to an anti-racist call. Why? You are a white woman. Why do? You have to let only people of color here, and you get people on each other's throats because they compete for very little money,
Yeah.
We have now the Norwegian funds, and somebody tell me that only 10 or 16 projects would have won, and there were like more than 100, more than 200 projects. And when you have such a fierce competition, you have people on each other's throats, and you have this type of very well-behaved activism and radicalism. First point. Second point, it is also very seductive, because you think you are fighting for the right causes. And in the short run, of course, you solve problems. We had at the Institute for Social Solidarity, where I also work, I founded this NGO, and we organized debates with Friedrich Ebert Stiftung Foundation here in Romania. And we had Jason Hickel. He's well known for his work, and he discussed this thing related to how you can reach to the point where activism might be just a way to shut up critical voices and to shut up the critical conscience in your head, because you're thinking you are doing a good thing for some poor people. And of course you are. In the short term, you are the best, but in the long run, you are not addressing the structural causes that got those children in that situation. And this type of activism and of charity becomes a way, as good old Marxists say, of shutting down your critical conscience and of putting to sleep your critical thoughts about what happens. And it also shuts down, it keeps you going on causes that are not addressing the real issues and the real problems causing poverty and inequality and all the things that you are somehow focusing on the effects, and you are trying to gain money to address the effects, and you are fighting with others in some sort of Hunger Games to get some money to fight some causes, some of the effects, while the causes are still there. This is the picture. It's so dangerous. In this situation, it is almost impossible to convey a message that is, because look, here in Romania, we have the Romanian left, okay? How are they going to support themselves if they suddenly decide that they're not going to support minority rights or gay rights or Roma and fight against discrimination? They are going to fight for workers. And who's going to give them money for that? I'm asking you. How are they going to lead their daily lives since they are dependent financially? I may be very relaxed because I have a job at the university and I do this for fun, but there are people who depend on that money, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not going to, even if you think they would somehow think, okay, we are going to compromise, and from now on we are going to talk only to poor people, and we are going to leave aside, we are not going to abandon completely, but we are going to put aside those causes. And how are they going to support themselves? It's also, you know, how you see how the material conditions, like good old Marxists say, create.
And I think and again, and that's where the dilemma comes. And you know, before I talk about how the Eastern European left can learn some lessons from the Bernie Sanders campaign, Tulsi Gabbard, who's another figure people I think should study, and you know, Jeremy Corbyn. But before I talk about where you could learn some of the positives of their campaign, you know, I remember that oh shit, I think I lost my train of thought now. What did I want to say? Well, okay, I completely forgot what I was going to say. But I'll use the example then of of where you could learn from Bernie, Tulsi, and Jeremy Corbyn. When Bernie Sanders came on the political stage, and like I told you, I thought that he was going to only be in the primaries when it was him versus Clinton. I only thought he was going to be there 2 months maximum because Americans are not going to support a guy who says he support a guy who calls himself a socialist. That's what I thought. But of course, he completely beat my expectations with how much money he received in just small donations, and he really shifted the conversation from boring, centrist, incremental nonsense and Donald Trump is a fascist to the economic system is not working for us. We really need to help out poor people. We need to raise the minimum wage. There's a climate crisis. We need to stop fracking, blah, 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 and all that stuff. And Bernie Sanders went to Liberty University. This is where, you know, Romanians can, can relate to. And Liberty University is this Christian university. It's a socially conservative Christian university founded by the late Jerry Falwell, who was this far-right Christian figure who supported Ronald Reagan, and created that far-right movement, which we're still dealing with to this day. So his son, who used to be the head of the university, had to resign because of a scandal, invited Bernie Sanders to the university. And I remember the reaction amongst people in left-leaning media, which early on supported Bernie Sanders' campaign. They all said to him, "What is Bernie doing talking to these deplorables?" I guess before Clinton even coined that term. And I thought to myself, okay, let me see what Bernie, does. And then I ended up watching, the link on YouTube, Bernie Sanders talking to a huge, like basketball stadium audience, football stadium type of audience. And he said from the get-go in his speech, he was saying, "Thank you for inviting me to Liberty University. Now, I first want to get something out of the way. I support a woman's right to choose. I support gay rights. But I'm not here to discuss about that because right now, I want to talk to you about an issue which is going to unite all of us." And then poof, he just went on his, typical, greatest hits list on how the economic system is rigged, oligarchs control our media and stuff like that. Many of you guys are going to be in debt. Jobs are going overseas to China, and we need to unite and have a political revolution to throw out the oligarchy, yada, yada, yada. And he got a huge, like almost semi-standing ovation. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the applause was probably people who were traveling to see, wherever he was campaigning. but there must have been a huge right-wing audience there that was resonating with Bernie. And then,
of course.
and then I
Because
want.
think okay.
Yeah, and then the other example I wanted to give is Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi, Gabbard, when she was also running for the nomination this time around, she appealed very much to libertarians and people who really do believe in market fundamentalism. And the reason why she appealed to them was because she was actually willing to go to their media outlets, have a sensible conversation with them. And I think many of them liked her anti-war stances, her anti-imperialism stances, her wanting to, clamp down on the deep state and so forth. And what was so ironic was that her policies were identical to Bernie. In fact, I think even slightly better than Bernie's domestic thing. But she had lots of right-wingers come to her campaign and support her. She got favorable coverage on, Fox News, particularly Tucker Carlson. And because of that, the Sanders people and the Democrats hated her with a passion and thought, oh, she's a right-winger who appeals to right-wingers, so therefore she's a deplorable. But no, not at all. She was very much like Bernie Sanders. And she was even able to convince these libertarians who believe in the market is God, because they liked her for her anti-war stances, they became much more open to the idea of a single-payer healthcare system. Michael Tracy was the journalist that that often covered her campaign, and it was very obvious that she was able to convert people to a left-wing cause, and she did this without even having to talk all that much about identity politics. And so I think that's where the left in Eastern Europe can learn from, while not throwing all of those important issues like feminism, queer rights, and the rights of the Roma people under the bus. But it's just like you said, you can't go into your campaign by saying queer rights, women's liberation, and reparations for the Roma people. It has to be economics. It has to be economics, and hopefully through that you can engage with people and convert them into social liberal issues.
Yes, I think you're right, because in the end, what matters is some sort of community and pluralism of ideas. I was going to talk to you about how, I don't know, how the left is isolating itself in a very small bubble, and they are marching on ideas that are not always, even though they may seem appealing, like the right of self-representation, this has to be this has to be taken rationally, because you have your fellow citizen Daniel Cameron, the DA of Kentucky, who is nothing but a progressive, and even though he's a man of color, he's very conservative. And you also have Yelena Mizulina from Russia, who said that domestic violence should not be a crime, okay? And she's a woman, and she actually wrote a law decriminalizing domestic violence. So this is also very important to note. You have to have plurality of ideas, plurality of skin tones, but you don't have to be very narrow-minded and to say it's like a soup, and we have to have also people of color, let's throw them in. Oh, okay, and we also have some gays, and then we'll have the perfect soup. You have to have ideas and plurality of ideas and points of view, first of all. And second of all, it's also very important not to behave like you are some sort of righteous monk that is being captured in a citadel that is being under siege and is being threatened, okay? And to stay there and say, I am not discussing with these people. These are Christians. Oh, I'm not debating anything with them.
In fact,
No, this
it's
is
wrong
not
to
the
do
right
that.
way to go.
Exactly. It's
This is not the right way to go, especially if you're an activist, especially if you want to have something to do with politics. Then you have to talk to everybody, because look, you may isolate yourself and posture as the most radical feminist of all, but that would lead you nowhere. How about popularizing some of the issues to more conservative groups and getting people closer to your ideas and talk to them, because they're not Satan, okay? Otherwise, you are just repeating this right-wing perspective where you have bad people and good people, and you are only talking, of course you are the good one and you are talking only to good people, and I think this is very problematic and this is going to lead you nowhere. So
in fact, I agree with you to a certain extent on that, because again, if you go to a place like Texas and you talk to them about, strict gun rights and stuff like that, you're not going to convert those people to your cause. Now, talk to people about how the cost of living is skyrocketing, and about how people are living in abject poverty because of a healthcare system which which is in the hands of private insurance and stuff like that. I would hope, and I'm sure that would resonate with many people. But if you because in the end of the day, in the U.S., although poverty is worse when you're an indigenous person, a black person, a Latino person, we can't forget also that there's lots and lots of poor white people. I mean, the opiate crisis has devastated white communities, and there are lots of white people who also live in abject poverty, living in trailer homes, and they're also in jail because of they can't pay their debts and stuff like that. Which I think is why when Bernie talked about when he talked about how we can't support the TPP because it's going to send all these jobs over to Asia, that really resonated with people. And in England, I remember when I was covering the Labour Party conference, I was actually there, covering it for a Black Agenda report. I was at this meeting from this anti-racist organization called Hope Not Hate, and the way they were talking about Brexit and Brexit supporters, they were really talking about Brexit supporters as if they were all a bunch of ignorant racists, and Nigel Farage was their god, and they all look at these far-right conspiracy medias. And I thought to myself, okay, there may be some truth to that, but come on, these are people who live in abject poverty, who live in completely forgotten communities. And yes, maybe the whole Leave campaign was a very xenophobic campaign based on the whole lies, but there was also legitimate grievances people had. People said the common thing was that the establishment doesn't listen to us. We're tired of being forgotten. We're tired of everything hunky-dory to an extent in London, while we don't have adequate public transportation. And the more Jeremy Corbyn's campaign and the Liberal Democrats and so forth kept saying that these people did not know what they voted for, that they were manipulated by Facebook, that they were manipulated by Russians, and that they're all a bunch of stupid, ignorant racists. Well, don't be surprised when those very people keep giving you the middle finger and support, Nigel Farage in the European Union, or yours truly, Boris Johnson at home. And I think there is this self-righteous attitude, and and again, I'm not saying that racism does not exist, that xenophobia does not exist, and I'm very much frightened and appalled by it. But the more we do not address the whole economic structure of of capitalism and that rigged system, the more we kind of ignore that, the more the right, the more people are going to say, these liberals don't care about us, these socialists don't care about us, and then they're going to be much more prone into listening to all of these right-wing populist demagogues who don't even want to change the system. It's just, if an illegal comes, you give the guy a black eye. If a woman keeps talking about, her right to be paid more than you, just, tell her to shut the beep up. And yeah, and it's
it's very difficult, and the conservatives are going to win when you have this neoliberal precarization, and people are so frightened. They are going to hang on to the church, to the family, to traditional values, because they want to have something stable in their life. And you have to understand the economic basis of this type of conservative and conservative leaning people. You have to understand that I think for the most part, they are relying on their family and the church and so on and so forth, because they are very scared, because we live in these precarious conditions.
Exactly. Which then leads into the whole dilemma. Which then leads into the whole dilemma of how to. I mean, I think in Eastern Europe, it may take a long time, but I think if Eastern Europe sort of learns a little bit from the Bernie Sanders and the Tulsi Gabbards and doesn't pay attention to those self-righteous social justice warriors who say, you're a bad person for talking to this bigoted person, you're a bad person if you go to this very far-right community over there. I think people, I think the Bernie Sanders and the Corbyns of Eastern Europe should ignore all of that and actually try to engage with those people, because like you said, they're the electorate, and you're going to have to talk to them eventually. And okay, maybe don't talk to them about queer liberation and giving reparations to the Roma people. And for an audience that doesn't know, when we say Roma people, that's the politically correct term for gypsies, just in case people don't know that. I mean, yeah, you're not going to win those people over when you talk about that. But if you talk to them about socialism, if you talk to them about the class structure, they might be converted. And even then, do not talk to them about how wonderful it was under Ceausescu, and don't show them a picture of Lenin, and don't show them a statue of Chairman Mao, because this too, because this is also the other problem that you said to us last time, that you have Eastern European left groups in Romania, for example, who talk about the glory days of Ceausescu. And you know what? Yes, there were some good things that Ceausescu had. There's always good things that governments do for some people. Otherwise, they wouldn't stay in power for that long. But that being said, it goes back to what John Lennon wrote in the song Revolution. If you talk about destruction, if you talk about a dictatorship of the proletariat, and if you go carry your pictures of Leon Trotsky, Stalin, and Chairman Mao, you're not going to convert those people. If you talk to them about socialism, democratic socialism, and and stuff like that, I think those people will be converted. And then the more you start engaging with them, I think that's where it gives more of a leeway to those people being much more open to women's liberation, queer liberation, immigrants having the same equal rights, and welcoming Muslim refugees with open arms.
Yeah, let's hope so. Well, it was very nice talking to you, and I'm looking forward for our discussion on Sunday on the U.S. presidential elections.
Oh, we're gonna have plenty to talk about, Doctor. Oh, and actually, and just before we close, I think your viewers, they should also check out Thomas Frank, who they might be familiar with. Thomas Frank, who I've had on the show before. And I think those who are already left should probably read his book, What's the Matter with Kansas, because that also addresses all of the issues we talk about in American context, and why is it that a place like Kansas keeps voting for right-wingers when their economic situation keeps getting worse. Thomas Frank also grapples with that dilemma, but he has said many times afterwards that if you talk to those people about class and just explain to them in a very easy way and not so much in a condescending intellectual way, you might be able to win those people over, as Bernie and to an extent Tulsi Gabbard did. But that'll be that'll be to be continued then.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the discussion. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Doctor, and looking forward to having you back on again. And I'll make sure to that I link to the barricades that people can check that out.
Okay. Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.